Okay, good evening, folks. Today's August 25th. It's pushing about 6:10 p.m. Sorry for running a little bit late. We had a very full closed session. We started at 4:30 p.m. And there was an adoption of the agenda at that time. And we're now out of closed session. There's nothing to report out of closed session, correct? Okay, and so for the opening of this meeting, we're going to ask that the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag be led tonight by Paris Hajali, a senior at Beckman High School. Paris, thank you.
Please stand for the pledge. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Paris, why don't you just stay right where you are, because I think we're going to call up everybody to administer the oath of office to the newly appointed student members and the alternate student members. And so I'm going to call you first right up here, and I'm going to move down there. So the first one is Paris Ajali from Beckman High School. If you could just come on up and I'll call up the others for the oath of office. Okay, this is my privilege to call up the rest of the students that have been designated by the school board for the next academic year, 2014-2015, to be our board representatives to keep us informed about the happenings throughout the district and at the respective schools. So I'd also like to call up at this point now Bianca Lacavera. Is that how I pronounce it? Yeah. Lacavera at Beckman High School as well. And Kashani Hathatuagama from Foothill High School, Amanda Wynn from Tustin High School. Those are our student board members, and I'm going to also ask that the alternate student board members come up as well. That's already Paris is up here as well. Elizabeth Jensen, please, from Foothill High School. And Hanad Musa from Tustin High School. So let's give them a big hand. Okay, so first of all, I just want to tell you on behalf of the board, we're very excited to have you come along for the 2014-15 year. And you are the class of 15. We've been waiting a long time for the big old number of 15 to come about, and you are our class of 2015 this year. And the board really appreciates all your reports and all the research that you do in terms of going out in the field and investigating what you're going to share with the board about your school or about the district. And we know that it takes some extra effort to put things into writing and to convey your thoughts in a public setting on TV and in front of sometimes some fairly large audiences. And so we're going to appreciate all your hard work. And congratulations on your achievement of becoming board representatives. So with that said, I want to administer the oath of office to you. And so the way I think we'll leave it is we're just going to go. I'm going to basically. It starts out and you're going to say your name, and I'm going to put the microphone for the record in front of everybody, and we're going to go down the line when we say your name, because you have to identify yourself by your name. And this is an oath of office, by the way, that the governor of the state of California takes. I took this oath of office. Any elected representative takes this oath of office. So you're sharing the oath that is set forth in legislative statute that all public officials take. So it's a special oath. And so with respect to that, you're already standing. I'm going to ask all of you to raise your right hand and identify yourself by saying, like, for example, I'm going to say, I, James Laird. You say I and your name. Okay, ready? Do I have enough cord? Okay.
I, Hanad Musa.
I, Elizabeth Jensen.
I, Amanda Wynn.
I, Kashani Hathatuagama.
I, Bianca Lacavera.
I, Paris Ajali,
Okay, please repeat after me. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. Congratulations, you have been sworn in. All right, so this is probably picture time, or do we have them sign right now? Okay. Before we leave, you're going to sign the certificates, which will be presented to you at a later time. But you have to actually sign your certificate for the oath of office. So, do you want to have Dr. Franklin come up on the other end to be the bookend on this?
Yes.
Thank you. And the pair. Obviously, the parents. Mr. Elliott will take one photograph, and then all parents are welcome to come up and take a good shot of the group. Okay, if you want to come on up. Just don't. These guys are. This is the era of the selfie. They love this stuff.
All the pins are there.
Yeah, I'd like to sign it right away.
Oh, okay.
Let me see. Here's pen. Yeah, I want to get my glass. Okay, I want to make sure it's signed the right way. Okay.
Oh, that would be a great idea.
Amanda?
There's two of each, Jake.
Oh, there's two of each?
Yep.
Yeah, I know.
We start 10 minutes later.
Sure. Yep, and you want to sign it both.
Bianca.
Okay, there.
Paris. Jump in here.
just sign both of them.
Yeah. You keep one. You get the
Okay. There, that one's done.
Got one that side. Okay.
These two. Okay.
There you go. Keep yours.
All right.
One.
I was going to sign mine.
Paris, here. There you go. We got. Good.
Okay, right. Sign of the declaration.
Yeah, you keep one. I got it.
Well, thanks, James.
Okay, good.
Nice.
We'll see you guys September 8th.
Okay,
I'm glad you knew.
so
That's a good sign.
Nice. That is a good. Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Greg.
Yes.
all right. Congratulations, everybody. Very good. Good evening. On the agenda is a superintendent's report.
And I am pleased to report to you that our teachers have been back, and not just back, but really here throughout the summer in various capacities, highlighted by last week's Literacy Institute. We had a 3-day Literacy Institute for elementary teachers and another 3-day Literacy Institute for secondary staff. It was voluntary, but the volunteers did receive a stipend for participating. Over 90% of our teachers participated, which is just phenomenal. And I do want to recognize Stephanie Yang, who I don't believe is here this evening, but we'll be asking Stephanie to come to the September 8th meeting and give us a little overview of that activity, and recognizing her and the others who, we had a lot of teacher leaders participating as facilitators, as presenters, and it really makes you proud to see the quality of staff that we have who can lead their peers in their own professional development. So that's just one example of the kind of work that TUSD teachers have been doing through the summer. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Dr. Franklin. I believe there's no staff response to any public comments?
Correct.
Okay, moving on to public comments. Are there any comments the public wants to make on anything on the agenda or anything not on the agenda? Seeing no one come forward, we're going to move to the next item, and that's a discussion action item, the 2014-15 Tustin Unified School District goals and priorities. That's been an ongoing work in progress through the summer. And do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded by the board members. Any discussion on our priorities? Everybody's had some input on that. All in favor say aye. Aye. The ayes have it unanimously. Moving on to Board Policy 3554, that's food sales, either first reading or adopt. This motion is 3554. Is there a motion, a second?
I'll move to adopt.
I'll second.
Okay, so there's a motion to adopt this policy. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it unanimously. Now moving on to Board Policy 5113, absences and excuses.
I will move for first reading.
Okay, and I'll second that. So it's only for first reading at this point. Is that okay with the board? Any discussion? Approving the first reading of this subdivision C, Board Policy 5113. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Now we're going to move to deal with Measure S Citizens Oversight Committee, and that would be to appoint Katie Penny, at-large community representative, and Bruce Junior, senior citizens representative to the TUSD School Facilities Improvement District 2012-1 for the Citizens Oversight Committee of that committee as it executes Measure S effectively immediately with terms to expire June 30th, 2016. Is there a motion, a second?
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? We appreciate these folks for stepping up and volunteering. I think these are repeat volunteers. At least I know Bruce has been.
Yes.
Both of them have been repeat volunteers in this capacity. We do appreciate their public service. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it unanimously. Public hearing on the 2014-15 revised final budget as set forth in the agenda under subdivision E of our agenda. I open that hearing. Okay, does anybody want to be heard on the revised final budget in terms of the hearing? Okay, seeing no one coming forward, I'm going to close that hearing, and now we're moving on to subdivision F of the agenda. That's adoption of the 2014-15 revised final budget. Should we have
Maybe if you want to take
a motion and a second?
a presentation.
Okay.
I'll move approval.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and we're having a presentation at this point for the record.
Great. So I have Jocelyn and Diana here to get the presentation going.
Hello, Jocelyn and Diana. How are you doing today? Very good. Thank you.
Okay, ready to go. Okay, so, Mr. President, members of the board, tonight we'll be presenting an overview of the district's 2014-15 revised final budget. With regards to the presentation, we'll be actually updating you on changes at the state level, as well as changes in TUSD's budget since the June approval. In addition, we'll be reviewing the multi-year projections and the challenges that we have with the projections. As well, lastly, we're looking towards the future and what the future may look for us, for education in general and for the school district. So recall back in June, on June 20th, that the governor approved the 2014-15 state budget. Since then, the approval, there was additional subsequent chancellor bills that came out, clarifying information that was provided by other agencies as well as other advisories. We've also determined that a number of noteworthy items that we want to just point out to the board with regards to that will affect both the current and the multi-year projections. First is the actual improving state economy. The Department of Finance has recently reported that revenue collections for both the months of June and July have actually exceeded the projections. So that's good news. There's also a slight increase in the LCFF funding gap, and that's been incorporated into the budget. However, and that's for this year, 14-15. However, for 15-16, there's actually a pretty significant decline in funding. Unfortunately, to pay for the slight increase in 14-15 in terms of the increased funding, the state basically carried over about $1 billion in deferrals that's being continued from the previous year. So we'll keep a watchful eye because that will actually impact cash flow. With regards to changes, there was also changes announced by the State Board of Education regarding the use and reporting of targeted funds, as well as modifications to the LCAP template. So we'll have to sort through those modifications and see the impact and how that will impact going forward. In addition, we've taken into consideration increased pension costs that have been included in the projections, and Dinah will talk more about that in a later part of the presentation. And finally, we'll be talking about the actual reserve restrictions that are now law, and I'll be going over that topic in more detail, providing conversation with the board, discussion with the board later in the presentation. And so now Jocelyn will talk about the impact of the current budget and where we are as a district.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Tony. So what has changed since June? The LCF gap closure has increased by 1.51% to 29.56. We have increased funding in Title I and in lottery, and we have received new allocations of Microsoft grant funds. We have also been awarded new Title I program improvement funds and new funds from the Irvine Company for the Excellence in Education grant. Special education, AB 602 funding has decreased. Carryover has been included in revenues with corresponding expenditures. Salaries and benefits have been fine-tuned. Now I will briefly outline the budget dollars for revenues and expenditures. At approximately $162.7 million, LCFF is the largest portion of the budget and represents about 81% of total revenues. Federal revenue is at $8.8 million. Other state revenue is the second largest source of income and is approximately $21.9 million. Other local income is projected at $7.1 million. Overall, revenues are projected at $200.6 million. Total expenditures are approximately $208.6 million, with the largest portion being salaries and benefits, which are projected at $168 million and represent about 81% of total expenditures. This is the first time we've hit the $200 million mark in revenues and expenditures. As we mentioned in our June budget presentation, the LCAP designations are included in the 14-15 budget. Now it's time to gear up to begin the LCAP cycle again. The life cycle of the LCAP is one of constant reflecting, adapting, and growth. The cycle requires evaluation of progress in engaging stakeholders. Next is adapting our goals and actions based on stakeholder input. And lastly, adopting the annual update along with implementation. Now Diana will cover the multi-year projection challenges.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Well, it seems like just yesterday, the education community was breathing a sigh of relief that Proposition 30 was approved, and the expiration of these temporary taxes is quickly approaching. The sales tax increase of 0.25% lasts through 2016, and the income tax increase on high-income earners lasts through 2018. The higher rates are forecast to boost state revenues by $7.4 billion this year. This chart shows the impact of the expiration of Proposition 30 tax rates on a per ADA basis. Beginning in 2016-17, the quarter-cent increase in sales tax will expire. In 2018-19, the higher income tax rates will expire, resulting in a half-year loss in revenues. The following year, the full impact of the tax expirations will be felt. It's important to remember that the significance of this loss will be either compounded or mitigated by the overall condition of the state economy at this time. With a growing economy, the loss of Proposition 30 revenues could be offset by growth in Proposition 98. Thus, the loss may not be as painful. However, an economic slowdown coupled with the expiration of Proposition 30 could result in cuts to education funding. In any event, we know that this is a temporary tax, and its termination will lead to a natural drop in funding for schools in the near future. Another area of concern is escalating pension costs. In an effort to address the unfunded liabilities stemming from the 24% investment losses suffered during the Great Recession, the California PERS Employees Retirement System, or CalPERS, approved changes to its actuarial assumptions. With these new assumptions, CalPERS aims to fully fund the system, eliminating the unfunded liability in about 30 years. CalPERS has announced their escalating employer contribution rates. As you can see, the current rate of 11.77% will steadily increase to 20.4% over the next 6 years. Similarly, the California State Teachers Retirement System, or CalSTRS, was last fully funded in 1998. If investments had equaled the assumed return, the program would actually be overfunded. Unfortunately, the dot-com bust and the global recession have taken its toll, and the unfunded CalSTRS liability is estimated at $71 billion. The strategy to upshore the funding for the plan includes increased contributions by employers and employees and the state. This chart reflects only the employer contribution rate. Beginning with 2014-15 at 8.88%, the rate steadily increased each year, with fiscal year 2021 estimated at 19.1. Now Tony will review additional multi-year topics.
Okay, thank you, Dinah. So looking at ADA enrollment, while the student demographic data, that is the number of students of poverty, EL learners, foster and homeless students, is playing a greater role in determining the actual level of funding that we receive as a district. Overall student enrollment in ADA still drives a significant portion of the district's projected operations. So looking at ADA and student enrollment or ADA is a primary component that determines the major portion of funding sources related not only to the local control funding formula, but also to special education funding, lottery funding, mandated cost funding, as well as determining qualification for facilities funding. But in addition to that, student enrollment also drives changes in projected expenditures, such as teacher and other support staffing and related employee benefits, site allocations, as well as textbook orders, and major school construction projects are driven off of student enrollment projections. So while this next chart indicates that the district continues to grow, or has continued to grow over the years, the increase has actually flattened out over the years. For the 14-15 fiscal year, we had planned on conservatively growing by approximately 119 students. In anticipation of developments of Orchard Hills and also Tustin legacy areas, we are projecting enrollments to increase by approximately 230 and 325 over the next 2 years beyond that. However, at this point, we know that the current enrollment projections are actually below last year's CBEDS enrollment. So we still have a week before enrollment, and we're hopeful that, that the enrollment will increase. But we're really now in a watch mode with regards to looking at enrollment growth in the district and potentially having to make current and long-range modifications as necessary. Now, looking at the reserves, Senate bill, in a controversial last-minute budget proposal supported by the governor, the legislature approved Senate trailer bill SB 858, which basically dictates the maximum level of reserves that school districts can maintain. Specifically, effective with the 15-16 fiscal year, if a district adopts a budget with an unassigned and assigned ending fund balance in excess of the minimum level of reserve, the district must do several things. First of all, it must identify what its actual level of reserve is. In our district's case, it's 3%. Then it needs to determine the actual amount of excess above the minimum level reserve. And then it must prepare a statement that basically substantiates that excess and why you have that excess amount. This requirement is not much different than our current practice, as reserves and ending balances have always been a subject of public review and discussion with the board, and I've done that on an ongoing basis. This new process basically is a formality in terms of what we are actually doing. But secondly, and more significantly, should the voters approve Proposition 2 in November, and this is the state's rainy day fund, and the governor contributes to an education rainy day fund, the year following the governor's contribution to the education rainy day fund, reserves would be limited to 2 times the minimum reserve, or 6%. Local school boards would still be required to be responsible for maintaining solvency, despite being prohibited from maintaining a reserve above the minimum level of reserves. So fortunately, with SB 858, the county office has been granted, will be able to grant exemptions or waivers on the caps, but under very specific circumstances. And they are limited to 2 consecutive years for any one district. So obviously, this new legislation will greatly increase the exposure of district budgets to the volatility of the state budget situation. We talked about earlier in the presentation about the change in the LCAP funding. For 15-16, the estimated funding gap was at 20%, and just after districts approved their budget in June, they knocked that down to 10%. Again, this is the uncertainty that we're talking about with regards to addressing the uncertainties on funding. So already there is a movement with regards to wanting to appeal AB 858. On August 18th, AB 146 was introduced to restore local authority in terms of, to districts to determine the actual level of their own reserves. Unfortunately, it failed in a Senate hearing. So in summary, it's been well documented that prudent reserves above the state minimum are a necessity, regardless of state legislation. For TUSD, having reserves above the state minimum absolutely allowed our district to minimize the level of cuts during the downturn, and so in the worst of economic times. And it provided stability not only for our students, but for our staff as well. But in addition to providing our district with flexibility and the ability to protect itself during the economic downturns, there are many other reasons why you want to have reserves above the minimum levels. I will describe that for our district when I talk about it in the multi-year projections and reserves. But before we go there, I want to talk about the multi-year budget projections. So in dealing and working with the multi-year budget projections, I think it's important to recognize for the board that there are many changes that we need to take into consideration. Changes with regards to the eventual, as Diana talked about, scaling back of funds under Prop 30 for taxes, increased pension costs, the potential for a significant level of deficit spending should everything go according to the projections. Fluctuating enrollments that we've talked about, in particular the lower grade levels as well as the high school. And then we also have to maintain our employee commitments. So looking at and reviewing the multi-year projections, I want to go over a couple things. First of all, with regards to revenues. Revenues, as we talked about, we exceeded the $200 million mark for the first time. They increased by approximately $17.7 million in 14-15 alone. This was primarily due to the LCFF funding from the state, and this is by far an amount, in a way, the largest increase we've had in over 5 years in one single year. Revenues are projected to increase in the following year in 15-16, but only by $937,000, and that's because there's a lower projected funding gap for the following year. And there's also loss of one-time federal carryover revenues, as well as a reduction in local revenues. But revenues are projected again to increase by about $5.6 million in 16-17. Again, this fluctuation in terms of funding going forward. For future years, expenditures are expected to stabilize after we factor out one-time expenditures and incorporating growth, salary, and benefit commitments, as well as other cost increases and changes. I think of greater concern, just for the board to be aware, is the level of deficit spending based on the current projections. But we also know that the deficit is related to conservative projections going forward that are dependent on the state level of funding and expenditure assumptions that will change over the course of time. I will talk more about how we're going to address what is currently being projected as a level of deficit spending when we talk about our reserves. I think, but even when you talk about the level of deficits that we're projecting, we're still able to have a stable ending fund balance and still be in a good financial situation as far as our ending fund balance is concerned. So now looking at the components of our ending fund balance, and I want to talk a little bit more about that because next year this will become a normal thing, so I want to start now and make sure the board is informed. When you look at the reserves, first I want you to look at what I would call the non-spendable reserves. Those are items such as revolving cash, stores inventory, workers' comp benefit accounts, and accrued vacation. These amounts must be set aside because they are already committed. They've already been essentially spent for those particular items that I just talked about in terms of the description. There's ERP money that is related to federal funds that we've had for a couple of years that has already been committed for retiree health benefits, and we will exhaust those funds over a 2-year period. So that's explanation of those reserves. The unfilled district priorities are related to district priority positions that we've, as a board and the district, had committed to for in 13-14, but were actually not filled until the 14-15 fiscal year. So it doesn't make any sense to set those or to allow those reserves to fall out when they've already been committed. The pension liability reserve recognizes, as Dinah talked about, the increased district contributions that are expected to go now and forward. The uncertain low control funding formula, the LCFF, are funds that are, all the experts suggest that school districts should actually set aside above the minimum level. These reserves are actually being spent down in the projection to address the currently projected deficits. Over the course of the past year, we've also had study session discussions with regards to improving the condition of our athletic fields. Therefore, we've set aside funds for facility maintenance, recognizing that there are significant costs that we'll be incurring and that we'll be working with the board in terms of developing a plan. Technology, as everybody knows, is a very costly endeavor. Measure S funds were paid for the initial setup of classroom teaching stations. We know that in the future, these costs will have to be picked up by the district, and so we're setting funds aside for that purpose as well. The restricted balances are basically restricted balances for categorical carryover funds that have very specific purposes. The reserve for economic uncertainty basically is the amount that the state gauges by in terms of meeting the minimum necessary reserve to absorb uncertainties. The reality is that this amount, even though it's significant at $12 million plus, really is below 1 month of actual salaries and benefits that we pay. So when we look in the big picture and the scope of what we're talking about, $200 million budget, it's a very small amount that we're looking for. And that's why we need that additional reserve, and that's why School Services has talked about setting those aside. So looking at the future, what do we look for in the future? Well, with regards to what's in store for us, it's more basically of the LCAP. Kathy will be talking, and Ed Services will be talking about the LCAP, which includes a reflection of the current needs that Jocelyn talked about, and priorities and the growth of the district. And then it needs to be reported in the new format that the state has actually come up with in terms of a new state template that is evolving. We'll be addressing the typical things with regards to looking at multi-year projections related to bargaining unit negotiations, health and welfare cost increases, deficit spending, the volatility of funding with regards to whether it's the gap funding or the loss of funding from Prop 30 funds. And the most importantly, I think, looking at to protect the district and ensuring that we have sufficient reserves that will provide a safety net for the district and stability to address both foreseen and unforeseen events in a more well-planned manner. So, in conclusion, we're asking the board to basically certify the 14-15 budget, the revised final budget, as positive, and that the board understands that it has its fiduciary responsibilities to maintain fiscal solvency not only the current year, but 2 subsequent years, and will make whatever changes and adjustments as necessary to maintain a positive certification. So with that, I'm open to questions that the board may have.
I just have a quick one.
Yes.
Do you think anybody's going to take another run at that assembly bill or language similar to that failed about the reserves, or is that?
No, I
an
think
issue?
that in this next year, that will happen. There's already discussion about that. There's AXA is doing that. CASBO is working on that.
Okay.
So there is going to be another run at that. The question is going to be, in what shape or format. There was pressures placed on the governor to make this happen. The reality is that there's also some options. School Services came out with an interesting article that talked about, the likelihood of actually funds being available within the next 3 to 5 years when all this happens. Because just with the economy going up and
Yep.
down, there's some uncertainty. So that might take care of itself. But there's some other options that the district would have in terms of classifying reserves that once we know more, particularly going into next year, that I'll share with the board. But right now, it's, I think, a little premature
Okay.
to see where that's actually going to end up at.
I just think it's a shame when, you do the best you can with the dollars that you're given, and we've always been a very conservative district and board, and to get your hands slapped for planning for the future, and we have deficits spent, over the last several years, many times. And we had the funds to do so, and that was because of prudent planning, and I just think that's absurd for them to limit what we can plan for. It just makes no sense, and like you alluded to earlier, we got through the roughest times better than any other district in this county because we had reserves and we had a plan. And I don't
Right.
think this board's gonna ever quit planning.
So our plan is basically to give that board that we're going to continue to do the same things. It might look a little bit different, but once we know all the rules to the game,
Yeah,
we'll
I
come
know
back with a
that's the
game
key.
plan to address that going forward. So you can count on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Anybody? Okay, I just had a question. It's, on the CalPERS and the pension contributions, there's a employer component and an employee component. Is that, how does that work when you're projecting this? Is CalPERS delegated the authority to set this by the legislature, or does the legislature vote on these numbers in the future? I just was curious if you know.
So in clarifying, with CalPERS, the PERS board sets that rate, and that has already been set with PERS, and that would be the non-instructional staff. That pension or that rate is set by that body and is ongoing. There is not a contribution from the employees per se with regards to CalPERS. CalSTRS is something different. There is legislative action. The legislature did take action at the final minute, with the final budget approval to basically increase the contributions for both, for 3 groups: the state, employees, and the employer. I'll let you guess which one took the larger, absorbed the larger amount of the increased costs. Obviously, the employers, so school districts. So we have set those funds aside, and you've seen that, so it's very clearly articulated as to what the cost is going forward, and that's going to be an ongoing cost for, I think, the next 7 years. And so it really kind of skyrockets. Earlier scenarios were that there was going to be a much larger increase in the early years. Now they just kind of let it kind of flow a little more gently going forward, but the impact is the same. It's pretty significant going forward. On the increase, the employees do pick up, they do have, and Dan, I'm going to ask, what is the current, what's the current employee rate? It's under 10%. I think it's under 10%, but the employees do pick up 7-8% of the cost, so they contribute that. But on the increase, so now we're only talking about the increase, the employer is picking up that increase on the PERS side. Yeah. And so that's why we've made sure the board is aware of that.
And if you're in CalPERS, you don't get Social Security?
CalSTRS does not get Social Security.
Or what about CalPERS?
They do get Social Security.
On top of not having to contribute?
But in addition, for people who are on CalSTRS, they don't have the deduction for Social Security, where PERS employees do have deductions for Social Security. So they are contributing to Social Security. So non-instructional,
To Social Security,
they do contribute to Social Security as a deduction of their payroll,
but not to the state, not to PERS.
not on the increase. I want to make sure it's clear, on the increase. So they do contribute, on a regular basis, they do contribute to Social Security, they do contribute to PERS at the current rates. That's not changing. But with the increased rates on PERS, the district is picking that increased cost. With regards to STRS, there is no Social Security contribution for the most part for the certificated staff. They are contributing on the current, for STRS, 8.25% was the number, and now that's escalating up to about 19%, and they will pick up a portion of the cost increase as well. I think next year it's at by about what,
Yeah, that
0.17%?
slide- Was that slide pertaining to
That was just
CalSTRS?
employers, and that was both PERS and STRS.
So both PERS and STRS are going up to 19% employer contribution?
No, it's that.
There were two
Go back
separate
to the slide.
slides.
Go back to the
There were
slide.
there were two separate slides.
Yes, there were two separate slides. So first, PERS,
Yeah, there were.
let's go PERS.
Yeah. there-
Okay,
that was
so
the
go,
first one.
go
That's
up one more,
STRS.
Jocelyn.
Okay,
That
that's
one.
STRS.
CalPERS, so basically it's 11.77%. That's the district's contribution in 14-15, and that will escalate to 20.4% in 2021. For STRS,
And in that time period, the employee contribution doesn't increase at all?
correct.
They haven't come
They haven't come out, but right now that is the,
The 20% rate doesn't include any of the employee part.
correct,
So actually, the total contribution
is higher.
coming out of the state fund, I mean, it's coming out of someplace that it's 25% maybe, 28%?
I don't have the state
I mean,
portion.
it's a huge number.
But the employee, I think, is like 7.
In other words, Social Security is whatever, it's about 14%, right, if you add the employee and employer. So I was trying to get a comparable number with CalPERS. So it's it goes to 20% for the employer, which is us. And then how much is it's a much bigger number than Social Security when you add it all together.
Yeah, I would say so. It is.
bigger
It is a
benefit.
much bigger number. And then STRS, Jocelyn, if you can. STRS, it ratchets up. Last year was 8.25%, 13-14. Now it's 8.88%, and then it ratchets up to 19.1%.
And again, this is just the employer.
The employer portion. The employee would also have an increased amount. I think it was 8.17% for just next year. Yeah, and there is a ratchet amount, but again, not nearly the increase that the employer is picking up.
I think it's, two things are important to point out. One is, as it was already said, teachers do not collect Social Security. Right?
Correct.
So they're, when like a private employer who pays a pension plan, pays that above Social Security for the most part.
Correct.
And this is instead of Social Security.
Correct.
Now, the other thing is, I think it's important to point out, and to my knowledge, the amounts, the benefits, and the formulas and all these things are entirely set by the state, right? They are not set by local school districts, and they are not negotiated between the local unions and the local school districts.
And that's an important point because other governmental agencies, such as cities and counties, there is a negotiation process, and they do contribute and have that with PERS in this case, with regards to county and city operations. And so they have more control over planned contributions than a school district. We basically just adhere to the regulations that have been pushed down to us.
So the 71 billion, or whatever the right number is. Because
Correct.
You can always argue about assumptions and actuarial projections, but whatever the right number is, is not something that was created by any school districts. It was something created entirely by state policy, or the combination of state policy and state investments,
right.
results.
So we just saw recently the investments actually improved. And if, again, if you using the actuarials and so forth, if they improve, as I think Diana talked about, had the assumptions that they had actually come to fruition, we wouldn't be talking about this issue now. Obviously, it hasn't, so we're addressing that. I mean, they have to address it that way, so. Any other questions from the board? Okay. Thank you, Diane and Jocelyn. I really
Yes,
like it.
thank you
Thank
very
you.
much,
Lot of work.
financial team. We appreciate it, as always. Okay, and so we're at the point where there's been a motion and a second to adopt the 2014-15 revised final budget. Is there a vote on it? Yes, and we'll say, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to the consent calendar.
I move the consent calendar through, I think we can go all the way through on this.
Okay, there's been a motion to approve the entire consent calendar. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for the entire consent calendar to be passed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it unanimously.
I'm assuming because it was a readmission that we could do it that way.
Oh, you were, no,
Technically, that's not part of the
Do it
consent.
separately.
Yeah.
yeah, that's not consent.
Sure.
So pupil personnel, we're moving to student number 2013-1409. Is there a motion, a second, to approve readmission to Tustin Unified?
So moved?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it unanimously. Board member comments.
I have just a quick one. We had our ROP board meeting this past week, and just to let you know, the maintenance of effort is going to expire. That was a 2-year commitment from the state to fund ROP, and that is expiring this coming June. So essentially, there's no funding for ROP. Our association has tried desperately with different assembly bills, et cetera, and as of this date, everything has either failed or it's dead. So in an effort to continue to support, to have a coastline ROP, the Joint Powers Agreement is going to be amended and brought before the Coastline ROP Board and before each one of our individual boards. And basically, they're seeking to get a commitment from each one of the 5-member districts to financially support Coastline ROP the way we have in the past. So there's attorneys working on it for Coastline ROP right now, drafting the new language. There won't be really a change to how we operate at all. It's just going to be basically a commitment of financing, otherwise Coastline ROP ceases to exist. So that will be coming forward to our board. I know Darlene will be talking to all the superintendents as they're putting that together. And secondly, I forgot to bring this in from my car, but I will go get it. There was a wonderful labor market study done out there that talks about, it kind of aligns the Coastline ROP's programs with what's going on in the labor market, and is it a declining area of employment, a stabilizing area, or a highly changing to the better area of employment based on the classes that we offer, and it's fascinating. And what was so wonderful about that is all the classes that we're offering through Coastline ROP in our 5-member districts, all of them are in labor market study areas that have an increase. So all this work we've done many years ago of eliminating the classes that weren't really getting our students anywhere, it's really paid off, and our labor market study over the last several years has continued to support the decisions we've made, as a board at ROP, and where we wanted the dollars to go and what type of classes we wanted funded. So that's it.
All right, thank you for keeping us apprised, Tammy, on that. Are there any other board member comments?
I
Davis?
attended the Tustin School Management Association event a couple weeks ago, where we prepared for the launching of the new school year, and everybody who was there, who included principals, assistant principals, support personnel in terms of like digital coaches, all of the functions in the district office and so forth. We're there and talking about how the challenges that we face and the things the massive change in essence we're trying to make and stepping forward and doing continuous improvement in our district, and the need to basically ensure that the energies of every single employee are engaged in this effort. And the book Multiplier Effect was used to talk about how leaders in our district could apply certain principles and act in certain ways that would in fact tend towards releasing energies and encouraging energies of everybody towards our goals rather than restricting or deflating those energies. And it was a very good conversation, and I was very pleased to be part of that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. I agree. That was a fun time there. Where's my bag with all the compliments about me? I had to leave early. Hopefully I heard it was just stock full of, they had to get 3 or 4 bags. Where is that bag? Dina, do you have that for me? Okay. Well, it's in my mail? That's not that big. Shoot. Okay. Darn it. Oh, yeah. Okay. And I admitted that I needed the Cliff Notes. Or no, I needed Mr. O'Donoghue to tell me what the book was about. I blew it there. Mr. Abelove, do you have any comments?
I'm gonna. We just have, with Broadway in the Park just ending from TACFA. We just have preliminary numbers. I'll have them for the next meeting. But we had over 5,000 people in the 5 nights.
That was awesome.
Wow.
Because the tickets for adults, and it was 4,007 or 4,800, but all children 5 and under were free. Clearly, we had 100 plus, and then some kids every single night under the age of 5. So, from our standpoint, it was well over 5,000 people in 5 nights. Which means more money coming back into the schools for arts.
Thank you, Jonathan. Anything? Francine, okay. Is anybody else going to be at the new teacher reception tomorrow besides myself? Any other? Okay.
I'm
All right,
hoping to
so
be,
I will,
at least for the first part.
okay, good.
I'll be there.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we're ready to adjourn then, I think. Or do we have to go to closed session? Okay, so there will be no more closed session. So is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you very much. Good night.